Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video is going to be about my activities Sunday last as chemtrails raged above over the city of San Francisco and the Golden Gate Bridge. I saw my longest chemtrail formation in my lifetime yesterday, Sunday, again at around 11 a.m. It went from Travis Air Force Base in Fairfield, Solano County in the east county area of the San Francisco Bay, and it traveled west toward the city of San Francisco. It went over Rio Vista, Antioch, Pittsburgh, Walnut Creek, Alamo, Lafayette, Moraga, and then into the Oakland Hills, beyond the city of Oakland, over the San Francisco Bay, and then over to the Golden Gate Bridge, and it appeared that it engulfed the North Tower of the Golden Gate Bridge over Sausalito, and I'm happy to report Belvedere, Tiburon Belvedere, which are where the big, highly paid CIA operatives reside. They have beautiful homes there. So I'm just giddy to let you know that aluminum, titanium, lithium, borax, barium, or whatever it is being cascaded down over elite bankers and clandestine service operators, just like the peasants. So I'm not sure what kind of a diabolical plan this is, but it's going to definitely take out a lot of really high-paid bankers. Belvedere was home to Tom Perkins, an elite of the elite bankers from White Plains, New York, who worked at Eugene Kleiner and Perkins CIA private bank with maximum security clearances. They brought you, CIA products like the Oracle database. They helped create LSI Logic along with Sequoia Capital and Don Valentine and Doug Leone. And let's not leave out the Bronx. Jerome Kohlberg and his KKR, Henry Kravis and George Roberts, their CIA clandestine banking approved as well, just like Don Valentine of the Bronx is, and Fordham University is, and Doug Leone from Genoa, Italy, which, by the way, is where Christopher Columbus grew up. That is a port facility, right? My video today is going to be entitled The Renaissance Pleasure Fair and Marin County Legacy. That's what I'm going to call it. So what I want you to know is that everything is banking-centric and military-centric. Banks and military are set up identically, just like a submarine. They're compartmentalized. They have divisions. They have units. They have departments. They have components within the departments. And this puts a lid on whistleblowing, minimizes things, and turns your business enterprise into a need-to-know basis. Anyway, that's a standard facility policy for the military and, of course, for the banks and, of course, for all things clandestine services. That's why I like to refer to these actors as clandestine soldiers. They all are operating under a military code of conduct, which is obedience, secrecy, and world mission. That's basically the Jesuits. That's the same for the Jesuits, which is a military structured organization, just like the Sacred Heart convent is. Can barely say their name. Anyway, so yesterday I went on a covert, I wouldn't call it a black ops, it was a day ops. So I went on an operation of reconnoitering cul-de-sacs, and specifically I went over to North Marin County. My intention was to explore where I thought that the Renaissance Fair was conceived, and turns out I was incorrect about that, but it had a 27-year history at Black Point Forest, which is on the Petaluma River where it enters the North Bay, San Pablo Bay. In Marin County, at the northeast corner of Marin County, which we've all known by watching my videos, is a high concentration CIA enterprise. And before it was CIA, it was military. It was the Hamilton Air Force Base. It was the United States Air Force. That's who controlled this particular area where the Renaissance Fair was eventually consigned. That was United States Air Force property, which was established in the 1930s. And it was commissioned, I believe, 1935, and then it operated during World War II as a fighter bomber training facility. Right there, it is now what is known as Bel Marin Keys, and it's a housing development. I understand there's a lot of toxic waste left over from where the Air Force left it. I don't think they decontaminated it, and there are rumors of bizarre physical ailments of homeowners that live in Bel Marin Keys. I'm not going to get into that right now. I'm talking about a piece of property that's bordered by Olive Drive, Atherton Avenue, and Atherton Oaks, Crest Road, Grandview Avenue. These are the perimeter roads that I explored in and around where the Renaissance Pleasure Fair operated for 27 years, from 1971 until 1998. It typically operated for about a month to 45 days, usually from the second week of April through Memorial Day weekend. Then later they experimented with changing the dates to Labor Day weekend into October. And I don't really know a lot of particulars about it, except to let you know that they brag that they had over 2,500 workers who were trained, went through exotic training for their specific roles in this Elizabethan Tudor epoch era, where they had to pay attention to details regarding, this is a time frame in merry old England, 1558 to 1603, Elizabethan era. And they wanted to recreate this. This is, when I say we, the front people are Ron Patterson and his lovely wife Phyllis Stimbert, Jewish. And they came together in Memphis, Tennessee, when Phyllis was attending college there, and Ron was an officer in the United States Air Force in Memphis. So they get married when Phyllis was 24. I think Ron was a year older, 25. And then they magically decide to move to Los Angeles, where they both get jobs in Culver City. Now that's code for military, right? That's code for Hollywood. That's code for these people didn't come from under a rock. In other words, Phyllis Steinbert and Ron Patterson are working for the CIA, okay? Once they got married in the 1950s. They're transferred to Culver City, where Phyllis teaches high school and Ron is prepared for his next assignment, which will be undercover. They're then given provisional housing in, guess where? Laurel Canyon. Laurel Canyon, it's 1963. Yeah, and the Air Force controls Laurel Canyon. You remember that the Air Force established, with a partnership involving the Disney Brothers Studios in Laurel Canyon, atop Lookout Mountain Drive, specifically 8935 Wonderland Avenue, 100,000 square feet, 5 studios, Walt Disney and joint, managed by the United States Air Force, underground lair, underground facility at 8935 Avenue. And then they have Timothy Leary is given a home less than a half a mile away from that address. So is Charlie Watson, not to be confused with Charlie Manson, it's not his real name, right? It's Charlie Miles Maddox is what it reads on his birth certificate. But when you talk to the media, they always give you a bunch of poppycock. So they changed his name to Maddox, or to Manson, because it sounds more menacing, I guess. Anyway, I don't want to get into that. Point is that Phyllis Steinbert, Jewish, marries Ron Patterson, takes his name. They have basically free housing in Laurel Canyon, which is Air Force controlled. They're working in Culver City. Remember, that is where Sharon Tate signed her first contract with MGM Studios in Culver City in the what is now the Sony Pictures building, owned by Amazon. That's where Dorothy Stratton was murdered in a cult ritual, bondage, sadomasochistic shotgun killing in Culver City, walking distance from where Sharon Tate signed her contract. This is where they had the fake fiery car crash that never happened with Anne Heche. It's right in this zip code. This is where Harvey Levin, another Jewish man, tells you what to believe with TMZ, fake news. This is where Loyola Marymount Jesuit University is located in this zip code. This is where Ronald Reagan worked for the United States Army Air Division, Airborne, but not in airplanes. He worked there in propaganda films in Culver City, where Ron Patterson and Phyllis Steinberg were trained to conduct the Renaissance Pleasure Fair. And they conducted their very first pleasure fair, I guess, as a beta test in Agora Hills in 1963 with money that they didn't have, right? So that means clandestine service funding. Agora Hills, you may know if you know California and the Ventura Highway, which is Highway 101, you'll know that it's next door to the porn capital. It's right next door to Calabasas. It's next door to Lost Hills, where Mel Gibson was taken. He was taken for his 9 hours to decide that he had a DUI problem at Lost Hills Sheriff's Department. Los Angeles County Sheriff's is in Lost Hills, next door to Agora Hills. This is next door to where Westlake Village is, where Rebecca Grossman mowed over 2 little boys, killing both of them. High speed, a couple years ago. This is next door to Hidden Hills, where Elvis Presley's daughter just died, where she lived outside the gate in that neighborhood. Inside the gate, you have Peter Grossman, Rebecca Grossman, Lori Loughlin, her ex-husband, took over all the Jose Menendez porn business in Heaven's Gate, or Lionsgate Productions. Used to be called Carol Cole Pictures, with a couple of Oliver Silverstein's partners. You know who they are, Mario Casar and Andres Weidman, whose real name is Andres Weidman is his real name. His fake name is Andrew Vajna. Yeah, let's forget. His CIA name is Andrew Vajna. His real name is Andres Weidman, both Jewish. Those are Oliver Silverstein Stone's partners. And they were in the porn business in Canoga Park, right? It's next door to Agora Hills, you know, where they had the very first Renaissance Pleasure Fair, where 3,000 attendees joined. Anyway, this is a CIA operation. You should know in the 60s, we sent Timothy Leary's working at the Millbrook Institute in 1963. He just got bounced out of Harvard for restructuring one of the students' brains, one of the students being Ted Kaczynski. He ends up in Millbrook, New York, which is now called, Daheim, owned by Union Carbide, transferred to Standard Oil CEO, and then on to, who took it over after that, right? It went to, Hitchcock and the Mellon banking family. So that's where Timothy Leary was. But then after being reassigned to San Francisco in 1965, he's working with Abigail Folger's mother. And this is when Phyllis and Ron Patterson are getting ready to come north, right? So it's just after the Summer of Love, 1968. They relocate the Renaissance Pleasure Fair comes north to Marin County, of course. You should know, as you read my channels and follow my work, everything's acronyms if it has to do with CIA and banking and military. It's always acronyms. And of course, the Renaissance Pleasure Fair is no different. It was entitled by the Air Force RPFS, which is Renaissance Fair Southern California, and it was RPFM for Northern California. 1968, they had a Renaissance Pleasure Fair at China Camp, San Rafael, which is next door to the County of Marin Civic Center offices. It's where the courthouse is, it's where the jail is. That's where all the county supervisors meet. And adjacent to that property is China Lake, and that's where obviously you'd have the first pleasure fair. You should remember the year earlier, in 1967, they had the Magic Mountain Musical Festival for a nominal price of $5 to $10, with the Hells Angels helping guide the people up Mount Tamalpais from the parking lot of the Civic Center, which is where China Lake is, which is where the Renaissance Fair is. Don't you see? All of these CI operations are very centric. They're Haight-Ashbury centric, then they're Presidio Army Base centric, they're Sharon Meadow, renamed Robin Williams Meadow centric, they're Fort Baker centric on the north tower of the Golden Gate Bridge, they're Civic Center, San Rafael, Marin County centric. They're not that imaginative, people. They're not that imaginative. Of course, the Church of Synanon would be on RCA Marconi property. And of course, the Bill and Ellen Strauss Zionist dairy farm would be their neighbor, their next door neighbor. 500 acres. A Jewish dairy farm, 500 acres, with money they never had to buy it, next door to a 1,100 acre RCA Marconi United States Navy facility adjacent. And their creamery is on that property. It's on their same side of the road, Marshall Petaluma Road. On the south side, they built the Strauss family creamery, where I guess they milk the cows. That's on RCA property, or it's right on the cusp of RCA Marconi property. So you have a radio signaling center and a Jewish dairy farm are basically in the same zip code for 1,600 acres of land if you combine them, which I like to do. My second purpose of my trip was to go explore, Lake Stafford, which is the watershed for North Marin County and the town of Novato, city of Novato, and to which backs up to the Luke Skywalker Ranch, the George Lucas properties with the Marin Agricultural Land Trust, which involves the Cordo Ranch, Fred Cordo Ranch family, as well as the Metallica 1,000 acres of land, and the Marin College of Marin Indian Valley campus. College of Marin has two campuses, one in Kentfield, which is Green Bay, Ross Valley, across the street from where Sean Penn used to live with Robin Wright, in a home that he didn't own. It's a CIA house. And Sean Penn is CIA, right? He's a Hollywood crisis actor for CIA. Remember he did Fast Times at Ridgemont High School, but then he went and did Falcon and the Snowman, right? Which is about TRW spy satellites and selling the technology to the evil Russians, which is a complete falsehood. The Russians don't need to steal that. I'm sure that information is provided to them free of charge, okay? They don't need Sean Penn to sell, to sell blueprints. But anyway, that's Falcon and the Snowman, that's Sean Penn. Then he did Milk, Harvey Milk, who's a CIA agent who got his head blown off, where Nancy Pelosi likes to preside over weddings at City Hall in San Francisco without her face diaper like she's supposed to wear. All right, so what I wanted to say is that Ron Patterson and Phyllis Steinberg, they're CIA, okay, from the United States Air Force. That's where they were indoctrinated. It's kind of the tale of two Phyllises, because where else have we heard that name Phyllis? Well, because we heard about Bill Strauss and his lovely wife Ellen Strauss, who escaped the Nazis from Amsterdam, Holland, right? And Bill Strauss, he escaped the Nazis from Hamburg to Czechoslovakia, to Palestine, Jerusalem, to Los Angeles, to San Luis Obispo, to getting free education at University of California, Berkeley, and Davis, and then hitting the jackpot with a 500-acre free dairy farm. Pretty impressive. Then he marries Ellen. And Ellen meets a friend, Phyllis Faber, who's a botanist, and they form MALT, M-A-L-T, Marin Agricultural Land Trust. And her name is Phyllis Faber, and she's Jewish. And then there's Phyllis Steinberg. She's Jewish, and she marries Ron Patterson, and they form the Renaissance Pleasure Fair, where they eventually employ up to 2,500 employee workers for something that only lasts 45 days. So I'm just telling you, there could never be an Amazon, there could never be a Google, there could never be a Cisco Systems to the size that it exists today without CIA banking, okay? And that's what this is. This thing is all put together financially, not by Ron Patterson, not by Phyllis, and Ellen Strauss and Phyllis Faber did not form the Marin Agricultural Center, Marin Agricultural Land Trust, where George Lucas voluntarily gives thousands of acres to, and Metallica donates 1,000 acres. That malt controls 55,000 acres of Marin County today. 55,000 acres in less than 40 years. There is no way that a couple of Jewish ladies could have pulled that off. So I'm telling you, that's a bank-operated operation, and Phyllis Faber and Ellen Strauss are the fake directors. Just like Ronald Reagan was the fake president of the United States. Before that, he was the fake governor of California. Before that, he was the fake president of the Screen Actors Guild for 6.5 years. But he's fake, meaning he's not in charge. And neither is Phyllis Faber, and neither is Phyllis Steinbert, and neither is Ellen Strauss. Those are the front people. That's what you should know. I am not falling for the potato in my tailpipe system. Anyway, when you ride around on the perimeter roads, you'll be very disturbed, as I was, to discover when I went up onto Crest Road, which I know intimately, I decided to dive down. There are several cul-de-sacs that run over as excellent surveillance sites for what is now the Stone Tree Golf Course, formerly where the Renaissance Festival gathered, where they had tens of thousands of visitors, allegedly, over a 45-day period of the Renaissance Pleasure Fair entertainment. We know that one of the workers was Leonard Lake, and he's a serial killer of 25 people. So whenever I know that one of your employees is a serial killer with United States Marine training, I perk up, okay? And that's the kind of place that Ron Patterson and Phyllis were putting together. They're putting together essentially a performing arts center, because they're like the London Academy of Dramatic Art, or they're like the New York Actors Studio. They're like ACT in San Francisco. They're providing a forum for people who want to be actors to pretend to be Renaissance characters from the Elizabethan era. But they're also training them to be CIA agents. In other words, people who present themselves different than who they really are. Like Peter Falk, for example, who's a Jewish man who portrayed himself as an Italian for decades. He punked everybody. Everybody thought he was Italian, but he's a Polish-Hungarian Jew from New York. All right, so what I wanted to tell you is I found several cul-de-sacs of note. They're all quite excellent for reconnaissance of the Renaissance Fair. The first one being Greenpoint Lane. The other two is Woodview Lane and Hampton Lane. They're all quite excellent, and they're actually above a housing development which is known as Atherton Oaks, which is off Atherton Avenue, which is pretty high up on the hillside across the street from where the golf course now is. But if you want to get a little higher, you use Woodview Lane, Hampton Lane, or Greenpoint Lane. You should know that Black Point, which is a boat launch today, and has a road called Harbor Drive, even though there is no harbor. There's a boat launch. They used to refer to it as the Black Point Forest. Perhaps there were more trees before they built the homes. Anyway, I went down all these cul-de-sacs, of course, dead end, with a lookout over the Renaissance Fair area. And I went down Greenpoint Lane, and about 3/4 of the way near the bottom, to my horror, I see a camouflaged diesel-powered generator on a trailer, and I stopped and I took photographs of it, including the serial number on it. It's a NATO-authorized United States Marine Corps piece of property that's camoed, parked on a undeveloped lot. There are 16 homes on Greenpoint Lane, 16 homes, but there's a couple of undeveloped parcels, and there's one parcel that has 2 storage facilities on it. It's not a house, but it's a storage facility. It's in close proximity to where this generator was, which is between number 29 and number 35 resident address at Greenpoint Lane. You can Google it. I'm telling you right now, it doesn't make sense that you'd have a NATO powered generator on a cul-de-sac in a really expensive neighborhood where the minimum home price is going to be $3.5 million for one of the dumpier houses. You're looking at $3.5 million because you've got view properties, and I'm just telling you. So you could go on up from that number. You can go $3 million up to $10 million in this neighborhood along Crest Road. Not to be confused with Crest Drive. There is a Crest Drive, and it's not far away, but I'm not talking about that. Crest Drive doesn't have the view. The surveillance view is on Crest Road. So that's what I wanted to tell you people, was that Ron Patterson and Phyllis Steinbert, his longtime partner, they eventually got divorced in the 1980s. They had a 27-year run in Marin County. They did 1 year at China Camp, which is next door to the Civic Center for Marin County, which is a CIA county. Then they moved the operation to Black Point Forest for 27 years. That's 28. Then the operation was moved up to the Nut Tree in Vacaville, and then down to Gilroy near the Garlic Festival, and couldn't find a home because then they built this golf course and created a gated community with Owl Ridge Court. Owl Ridge Court. It's gated. Can't go in there without trespassing. They also morphed in 1970. Ron Patterson looked into the Dickens Christmas Fair in San Francisco, which their children run that now, the Dickens Christmas Fair in San Francisco, and I know a number of people that participate in the Dickens Christmas Fair. That's a CIA-conceived operation, Dickens Christmas Fair. It's another play on this acting, this people presenting themselves not who they really are. But I'm telling you, whenever I find a NATO diesel-powered generator on a trailer in the middle of a enclave cul-de-sac, my ears perk up. So, especially when you use acronyms like Renaissance Pleasure Fair North, RPFM, RPFS, which got moved to Idlewood. By the way, the Idlewood Art Academy is a place where Ron and Phyllis Patterson spent time. And so did Timothy Leary, who was given 80 acres of property over in Wildwood. Oh, God. Into the woods. The Islewood School of Music and the Arts. It's in the mountains in Temecula, San Ysidro Mountains, which goes up to 5,000 feet of elevation. 5,500 feet of elevation. They've got a suicide mountain there and a suicide rock, and they got another peak that people like to hike and climb. Timothy Leary had an operation there from 1968 on. He had 80 acres of property there. He had a home next to the Air Force Disney Studios on Wonderland Park Avenue, which is close proximity to 8935 Wonderland Avenue. And that is where Phyllis and Ron Patterson were trained at the Islewood School of Music and the Arts. Very remote Southern California area. But after they did their training, they said goodbye to their Laurel Canyon home in the Hollywood Hills, and they moved up to Marin County, where they had a 27-year run of the Renaissance Pleasure Fair and the Dickens Christmas Fair. It's a CIA operation. Why would you be surprised that Timothy Leary, Sean Penn, Tom Perkins, private banker for Kleiner Perkins, Tom Weisel, who brought you Amgen and the Lance Armstrong story, who partnered with Phil Knight of Nike to give you 7 Tour de France victories? It's totally implausible, totally impossible, unless you write some checks, right? You got to pay for play. You don't win a bicycle race without writing checks. You don't win any professional championship race multiple years unless you start writing some checks. Just how it is. If it's professional, it means people are getting paid. That means the loser gets paid. That's what that means. Anyway, what I'm trying to tell you is there's just so many Phyllis's in this story. There's so much Timothy Leary in the story. There's too much private bankers in the story. And then you throw a bad actor in the story like Sean Penn. It's like throwing a hand grenade into my stories. That guy is toxic. Look, I enjoyed Sean Penn in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, but when he started driving a Range Rover over 50 miles an hour over the center line in a 25-mile-an-hour limit speed in Greenbrae on Thanksgiving morning, I said, this guy is an enemy of the people. And Sean Penn and his then wife, Robin Wright, who was in the passenger seat, they were out of control actors living across the street from the Ross Valley Players, which is also across the street from the College of Marin's Kentwood address, off Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. That's where Sean Penn lived. It's a noisy house with lots of traffic noise. He didn't own it. It's an assignment. It's a house that you're assigned when you're doing CIA Hollywood activities. Thanks for listening. Please hit the like and subscribe. I'll have to do another video on what I learned from the George Lucas reconnoitering on the northeast corner of his Skywalker Ranch property. Thank you. Take care.